All right. Well, I think we'd originally slated this to talk about the English elections and the French elections, which we will. But there is so much going on, and the Darleen Tana stuff yesterday, it's probably just a good time to have a catch-up with our mate from the Democracy Project, Bryce Edwards from Victoria University. Bryce, how are you, mate?
Hi, Sean. Yeah, I'm pretty excited at the moment. I love elections.
Oh, right, and all sorts of stuff going on. Firstly, not surprised at Britain, but as someone observed yesterday, bloody crazy that you can get a landslide with 33% of a 65 or 68% turnout in a general election.
Yeah, part of the problem is that Britain now has a multi-party system. So, it's not just two parties anymore. It ceased being two parties quite long ago, but now you've just got all these other minor parties, Greens, Reform, Scottish Nationalists, etc. And you can't really fit that into a first-past-the-post system where, the results are based on, a two-party competition. So it leads to this sort of distortion effect. 34% of the vote Labor got, but over 60% of the seats. So it's rather absurd, and it's in the interests now of the ruling party to keep things as it is. So there's not going to be reform from that.
Oh, okay. So you're going to say they're just going to steady the ship. They don't represent real change.
On the bigger issue of whether we're going to see a reforming new Labor government that's going to push back all the things the Tories have done and, create the good society. No, I'm not really convinced that Keir Starmer's new Labor government is really going to be that bold and transformative. There'll be a lot of similarities between the government and what we saw in New Zealand under Jacinda Ardern. A lot of big talk, a lot of symbolism. There'll be freshness in many ways, definitely. But in terms of substance, I'm not sure we're going to see any huge changes there. I don't mean to belittle, what some of the things they will change. And I think they'll probably operate in a much more competent and probably more clean way than the outgoing administration. But, it's a pretty low bar.
Yeah.
And so, there will be scandals and there will be incompetency. I think there's going to be a lot of disillusionment, especially on the left,
all right,
because there's illusions in this being, kind of...
And across the channel in France, it seems the left or the parties of the centre-left got together, did some horse trading solely to keep Le Pen and what some would call the far right out of power in France in a completely different scenario, but quite a sophisticated political scenario playing out there.
Yeah, different electoral systems, so different tactics, and you've got some similar things happening in the two countries. The big success story in the UK was Reform, of course, came from nowhere to get 14% of the vote. And, Nigel Farage really is, probably the most popular politician in the UK. And likewise in France with Le Pen, which, some people will call far right. I think I would call them nationalists, populists. They have had a huge leap forward in their popularity, and despite not winning the election, as has become clear, they still have gone up in their support to something quite significant. I think they got about 34% of the vote, whereas they used to only get, much less than that. So I think at the last election they got more like 17%. So, that's still a huge leap forward. It means they can't form a government because of those tactical, strategical, unholy alliances, really, between the centre and the left. But no, that is still, they're not defeated. And I think people are saying, France chose not to go with that, sort of radical populist force, but they actually still did in a very large...
all right, so you might have... Okay, so it's not over, that if you like, political confrontation isn't over. Yeah.
Oh, not at all. Not at all. So, the radicals, the populist radicals, the anti-establishment forces, are just huge in Europe at the moment. And so to suggest just because Labour won in the UK and because that force was kind of beaten into second or third place in France, it really does disguise that you've got a lot of revolt going on in these countries, a lot of people that are unhappy with the status quo.
Yeah. Hey, look, let's come home a little bit. And I said this morning, not entirely jokingly, the Green Party are in a tricky position. They either uphold a principle by abandoning it or abandon a principle by upholding another. In relation to Darleen Tana, they were against the waka jumping legislation, which would allow them. Well, they tried to repeal the waka jumping legislation, which would allow them to apply for the removal of Darleen Tana from Parliament. But that means they'd have to do a flip flop. It's a really it's a real pity, isn't it, that we don't have a law that just says if you're a List MP and your party abandons it, you're out of there.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree. I think the Greens have been quite correct over the years in calling the waka jumping bill undemocratic and putting too much power in the leadership's hands, and they've been right to oppose it. And I'm disappointed that the Greens seem to be softening a bit on that. They're not ruling out using it, and yes, they would be hypocrites to use it. It's really unfair on parties when MPs split, and especially for unprincipled reasons. But I don't think the answer is to give the power to the party leaders this, opportunity to just get rid of any dissenting MPs. Because as much as I don't really have any time for Darleen Tana, I still think it's, we don't know whether she's been treated fairly or not. We don't know whether, she's been bullied really by the majority of her party. And, we haven't seen the report.
Yeah.
She's claiming it's full of inaccuracies or it's
And Bryce, it strikes me there is a new kind of mythology for people who want to take out political opponents. You hire a lawyer to write a report and suddenly it's given the status of deciding your guilt or otherwise in the public minds. And Linda Clark is the classic for this. Local government bodies who want to get rid of people get Linda Clark to write a nasty report about them. But in many instances, people just say, screw your lawyer's report. It is meaningless.
And it is meaningless in that sense. It's only one person's investigation and judgment. And we as the public or these politicians get to choose whether we have confidence in those or not. But there's nothing sort of legal about these things. There's nothing agreed. And certainly no transparency. So I think we do need to be a bit sceptical about these. And I've got no reason to suggest that this lawyer, Rachel Burt, who carry out the Green report is in some way biased or not independent, but I just don't know.